Last time, the reign of Hante the 16th darkened. The bright hopes of his golden early years were now tarnished, as he fully became the paranoid monster that he would be remembered as, the Steel Chrysanthemum. Tyrannical and increasingly unstable, seeing enemies in every shadow, behind every corner. And all the Empire would suffer for his paranoia as it shaded into full-blown madness. Of course, it ended eventually. No king rules forever. But if the old saying is true that it is darkest before the dawn, then the final years of the Steel Chrysanthemum's reign were to be very, very dark indeed. And by this point, over a decade into his reign, there were those in the Empire that had finally found the will to resist him. Starting around the year 603, the Phoenix clan began sending covert humanitarian aid to those who had suffered under the tyranny of the Emperor, usually in the form of food and medicine. It's never mentioned as such, but given the Phoenix clan's mastery of magic, they may well have employed sorcerous means in order to get this aid to those who needed it without the Emperor finding out. But there were samurai who favored opposing the Steel Chrysanthemum openly. These rallied together to form a sizable rebel army based out of the western lands of the Lion Clan that had once belonged to the Kirin. Unfortunately, this open defiance did little but put a target on their backs. In 605, Hante the 16th called upon his right hand to deal with these upstarts, and as ever, Hidatsuneo loyally answered the call. Commanding a mix of crab army forces and several imperial legions, the stone crabs scoured the rebels from the land, sparing no one. The message was clear. Defying Hante the 16th simply meant committing seppuku with extra steps. Grim stuff. But if you want a sad story, let me spin you a yarn about one Doji Nariko, an exceptional beauty who received a vision of Lady Doji, founder of the Crane clan, on her Genpuku. The vision asked that Nariko vow to only marry once. Nariko agreed to this vow and went on to marry a handsome man of the Kakita family. Unfortunately, sometime after the death of his empress Doji Hime, Emperor Hante the 16th took a liking to Nariko and decided to pull what TV tropes calls the Uriah Gambit, sending her husband off to die in a pointless battle with the Yobanjin tribes. Once he was dead, the emperor forced Nariko to marry him, thus violating the terms of her vow to Lady Doji's spirit. Dishonored and despairing, Nariko took the only way out and committed suicide by jumping from the cliffs of the White Stag. One of her many admirers wrote a song in tribute to her bravery and lamenting her sad fate. The song became quite popular and was adopted by many as a sign of resistance against the Steel Chrysanthemum's tyranny. And this is the light stuff, because then came around the year 607, and the darkest and most terrible deeds of the Steel Chrysanthemum's reign began. And for the first time in years, the Emperor's cruelty fell upon a member of his own inner circle, supposedly his most loyal confederates, Suzume Kirako. Unlike the rest of Hante the 16th's inner circle, Kirako had very rarely been at the Emperor's side throughout his reign. If you recall, he had commanded her to travel the Empire and gauge the attitudes of the peasants and poorer samurai of his realm. This the Sparrow Clan Samurai Co. had done, interviewing people across Rokugan and helping them out wherever she could. The face of imperial charity. Of course, this meant that she was almost never at Otosan Uchi and had thus far remained ignorant of Hante the 16th's cruelty and his mounting paranoia. But then came the year 607, and Kirako happened to be visiting the imperial court, and apparently it was common knowledge in the court that the emperor was having some noble but unnamed samurai tortured for supposed disloyalty. Alas, Kirako made the crucial mistake of thinking that Hante the 16th was a man that could still be reasoned with at this point, and one day decided to protest this use of torture in open court. These are literally her words. "I cannot stand by as you torture an innocent man, my lord. I must object. Please do not do this." Famous last words. Literally. Of course the Steel Chrysanthemum had Kirako dragged off and tortured to death. What else were you expecting? What's really horrible is that this wasn't the worst thing he did to her. Ever since the reign of Emperor Genji, it was a well-known practice for some emperors to elevate certain individuals after their deaths and honor them as fortunes. Osanowo, peerless demigod's son of the Kami Hida. Soshi Saibankan, the wise and noble magistrate who reformed imperial law and co-founded the imperial legions. Akodo Tenjin, the poet who was martyred for the crime of criticizing the folly of Emperor Ningi in verse. But now, in by far the most evil act of his entire reign, Hantei XVI declared Kirako the fortune of torture, effectively condemning the spirit of his one-time friend to preside over that which she most despised for all eternity. Because yeah, nothing can rescind this elevation to fortune status, even if it's a malicious elevation. Just for good measure, the Steel Chrysanthemum decided to do the same to Daidoji Tojo, naming him the Fortune of Dung. In the autumn of 607, Rokugan suffered a drought that resulted in a very bad harvest. Was this perhaps the heavens punishing the empire for Hantei XVI's horrendous impiety? Certainly many peasants and monks thought so. This resentment only hardened still further when the famine carried on into the following year, 608. One bad harvest is one thing. 2 bad harvests in a row is pretty ominous. But at this point, the emperor was too busy ordering people killed on the slightest pretense to care what the peasants thought of him. At the moment, he was especially concerned with, once again, pruning his own family tree. Otomo Michiko, the emperor's sister and 3 years his junior, was killed while traveling through Crane Lands on her brother's order. The emperor blamed her death on bandits and then cynically used it as an excuse to impose further sanctions on the Crane clan. Meanwhile, her twin brother, Otomo Tsuruichi, had become both a noted duelist trained in the style of the Seppun Imperial Guardsman and a staunch supporter of his elder brother. And yet he died in an illegal duel at the hands of Akodo Tsurukan, one of the emperor's inner circle. But Tsurukan soon discovered that doing the emperor's dirty work would not be enough to save him. At the Winter Court of 608, Hantei XVI accused Tsurukan of treason and had him tortured and executed. He then ordained the same fate for Miya Karuo, imperial advisor and commander of the Golden Legion. At this point in his life, the food and pleasure-loving Miya daimyo had gotten so fat he is said to have weighed 350 pounds. One has to imagine at least half a dozen samurai were needed to drag Karuo off to his fate as the fat man pleaded for mercy from his merciless lord and master. Apparently thinking that even this wasn't enough, Hantei XVI then ordered all of the officers of the Golden Legion tortured and executed, and the legion itself disbanded. But no amount of political murder and court intrigue could prevent the pot that was Rokugan from boiling over. In 609, the next year, there was a third failed harvest, causing starving, desperate peasants to rise up in revolt. Unfortunately, desperation did no good for these peasant rebellions, as Hidatsuneo, solid and reliable as ever, crushed each uprising as it sprang into being. Meanwhile, the emperor's underhand, Shosuro Tsiya, and her steel magistrates had also been busy. In their efforts to sniff out anything that could be construed as treason against the Steel Chrysanthemum, not the highest bar to clear, they managed to uncover and expose the secret humanitarian aid employed by the Phoenix clan, sent to those that had been suffering under Hantei XVI's tyranny, which of course the emperor interpreted as treason. Since most of this Phoenix activity was based out of Chokai, a province of the Dragon Clan, as well as the Phoenix embassy city of Nikesake, the emperor began raising an army, primarily of Seppun family samurai, to purge this latest batch of traitors. What was not to be expected was that he then accused Shosuro Tsiya and the steel magistrates of conspiring against him. Then again, given the emperor's insanity at this point, maybe it was expected. At any rate, Tsiya certainly hadn't expected it. She, arguably the most genuinely loyal of the Steel Chrysanthemum's followers, who had been his secret lover through 2 marriages, was in shock, unable to believe or accept what was happening to her. Tsiya was made to confess under torture that she and the steel magistrates had indeed been plotting against the emperor just as he had accused them. And so each and every one was hanged. It is said that Sia went meekly to her death, a part of her perhaps hoping desperately for a last-minute mercy from her former lover. But it was not to be, and Sia met the same fate as so many of Hante XVI's close allies and family members. Only the stone crab, it seemed, was safe from the steel chrysanthemum's mounting paranoia. And with Tsuneo at his side, it seemed that no one could threaten the Emperor. But there was at least one person in the palace who was determined to try. The Emperor's mother, Koichi Hime. As the steel chrysanthemum had slowly but surely descended into madness, Koichi Hime had been the only person at court that could criticize him without being killed for it. That's not to say that he wouldn't punish her for doing so. He'd ordered the former empress whipped for protesting his naming Kirako and Tojo the fortunes of torture and dung. As a result, Koichi Hime had spent as much time as possible away from the capital. However, thanks to the connections made during her husband's reign, she still had allies in the court willing to keep her informed of developments. But knowledge had availed her little, and as the years had gone by, she had only been able to look on helplessly as one by one, her other children, and even her husband, had died under mysterious circumstances. And then, in 609, her very youngest child, Otomo Yurikan, went the way of his siblings. Sent to the Asako family to train as a scholar, Yurikan died when a mysterious fire erupted and consumed the library in which he was studying. Give you one guess as to who was responsible. No mention is made as to the fate of that one nameless sister of Hante XVI, but she was likely murdered by this time as well, as the sources mention that by the end of 609, only one other child remained to Koichi Hime, Otomo Tanaka. Meanwhile, by the year 610, the Steel Chrysanthemum's latest bout of reprisals were now ready to set into motion. An army of 100 Seppun soldiers marched out, razed Nikesake to the ground, and then set its sights on Chokai province. If you recall the previous episode, Dragon Clan champion Togashi Orakan, seeing the Emperor's spiral into madness, had recalled nearly all of his samurai to the mountains of the Dragon Clan, the lone exception being a force of Mirumoto left in Chokai. Alas, those Mirumoto nearly all died at the hands of the Emperor's madness. All save two, a young boy that had just passed his Genpuku and his 40-year-old sensei. For failing to wipe out every single samurai in Chokai province as he'd ordered, the Steel Chrysanthemum promptly ordered the 100 Seppun soldiers to be executed, their bodies hung on stakes along the road to Otosan Uchi. It was shortly after this latest bout of cruelty that Koichi Hime and Tanaka resolved to make their move. The sources dispute exactly how they planned to remove Hante XVI from the throne. Some say poison. Others claim that after the purging of Chokai province, the former empress attempted to persuade the otherwise staunchly loyal guardsmen of the Seppun family to join her and her remaining son in a coup. Whatever the plan, the Emperor learned of it, and soon enough the conspirators knew that he knew. Now it was a race, eliminate or be eliminated. Trapped in the prison of his own madness and having murdered pretty much every other loyal servant he'd had, the Steel Chrysanthemum now turned to the one man who had somehow remained immune to his murderous paranoia, Hida Tsuneo. And once more, stalwart and loyal as ever, Tsuneo agreed to carry out what proved to be his master's final command. Coming upon the former empress in her chambers, the stone crab promptly strangled her to death. But Koichi Hime remained defiant even in the face of doom. My curse on you, Tsuneo, is that you will follow him to death and beyond. Tsuneo, doubtless at the time, had no idea just how prophetic that curse would prove. An instant later, Otomo Tanaka and the other members of the conspiracy burst in. They were too late to save Koichi Hime, but there was still plenty of time to avenge her. The halls of Otosan Uchi rang to the clanging of steel and was spattered with blood. But though Tsuneo doubtless took many with him, even the stone crab could not stand against overwhelming numbers. All the samurai that had endured decades of Hante XVI's tyranny saw the moment. None were willing to oppose the conspirators. Indeed, many joined them. Any crab samurai loyal to their clan champion and the emperor died. And so at the end, Hante the 16th, the steel chrysanthemum, died alone on the point of his brother's sword. Before the hated tyrant's body had even cooled, Otomo Tanaka was offered the throne. But the last surviving son of Hante the 15th refused, feeling himself to be unworthy. Instead, he declared he would serve as regent for his brother's only son. He would train the boy to rule with wisdom and compassion, and reform the laws of the empire so that such a thing as this might never happen again. Word soon spread across Rokugan, and everywhere peasants and samurai alike breathed a sigh of relief. Naturally, the Crab clan was tainted by its association with the late emperor, but thanks to Hida Tsuneyo's foresight and planning, they were able to withstand the storm that followed. It proved a brief one, as Otomo Tanaka wished to restore peace to the empire, not pursue a vendetta. And so ended the turbulent reign of Hante the 16th, the Steel Chrysanthemum, the first tyrant emperor of Rokugan. Unfortunately, though, this would not be the last time the Empire would hear of him. Sorry to be a tease, but the War of the Spirits is a story for another time. Before there was Ellen Ripley. Before there was Wonder Woman. There was the original action heroine, Atalanta. Now available in ebook, paperback, and audio form. Links in the description.